Hold up, I ain't trying to stump, man, but the Yeezys jumped over the jump, man. I be in and out of arenas like I'm Scottie Pippen.
Left my elbow in the pot, a la Vince Carter.
Bitch, you weren't with me shooting in the gym?
James Harden with the range on me, nigga, way back.
Coach, they won't knock me off my pivot, get it.
Been flowing stupid since Vince Carter was on some through the legs arm and a hoop shit.
And you can live through anything if magic made it.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, now you do.
Okay. Yes, sir. We are back. Round of applause for yourselves. This is your guy, Marcellus Ease. And you already know, we're going to be cooking up today. A lot of interesting stuff that's happening around the league. Storylines galore. Some are compromising, some are not, but you already know how the league is. That Steve Ballmer and Aspiration situation is starting to get out of Adam Silver's hands, as we'll touch base on the surrounding lawsuits and how Adam Silver's very buddy-buddy cozying up with Trump during the finals made complete sense. Also, we'll touch base on Jason Kidd and his history of trying to be a lot more than just a head coach. That Luka fallout in Dallas has his fingerprints all over it. Last but not least, we're going to get into a multi-layered bag as we'll hear how the Damian Giannis situation was never right since the beginning, and also the many trickle-down effects of what I like to call Giannis culture now is going to begin to clash with Heat culture. Pat Riley down there in Miami normally has things running on a tight ship, but the politics of Bam Adebayo's contract will come into play, as we'll also touch base on the fallout of him and Tyler Herro and how Bam is not quite out of that rabbit hole yet. He is going to have to watch his back when it comes to Giannis. So I'm always stating that it's great to take you off your daily algorithms and get into some more nuanced topic, as right here we're going to get into a crazy multi-layered bag on the reason why the Kawhi Leonard trade got rejected, the cases that are not being talked about that's surrounding this whole Steve Ballmer aspiration, and the ruling that has definitely caused Steve Ballmer to now possibly get subpoenaed by the feds. It's outside of Adam Silver's hands now. He cannot protect them. All the emails, contacts, banking statements from the Clippers, as well as all of Ballmer's personal entities, possibly could get exposed right here. Again, this is going to be multi-layered because we're slowly going to see throughout this segment the real evaluation of what a superstar is worth to an NBA franchise. It's a lot more than you think, and I'll include in the links below my previous segments where we started totaling up all the money that Steve Ballmer has spent outside of paying Kawhi to get this aspiration quote-unquote entity set up. It's almost touching $500 million. That's why I stated, how much is an NBA superstar really worth to a franchise? So as we get into this, I'm gonna cover it from all angles, as we're gonna see the visuals of the paperwork of the outside cases, as well as hear the exact accusations that Steve Ballmer and Joe Sanberg got themselves caught up with, that has now led the feds to get involved, possibly sending out subpoenas not only to the Clippers to get all their financials and emails, but as well as Steve Ballmer. And that right there is what Adam Silver does not want. The NBA cannot protect them once the feds get involved. So a lot of questions will be answered right here of why this Kawhi Leonard trade got rejected, how much a star player is really worth to an NBA franchise, and also how the NBA got their reputation caught up in a spider web, as well as the famous law firm that they're using, Wachtell Lipton. Let's set the dates correctly. On July 6th, Kawhi Leonard fired not only his agent, but also his uncle. And just a few days before that, on June 30th, and this is the important date right here, a Delaware judge ruled that in the Karr versus Sanberg, and Sanberg is the guy who ran Aspiration. He has a long history with Ballmer as well. But in that case, Karr versus Sanberg, the judge ruled that it is allowed to move forward. And that's where a couple of holding companies who invested into Aspiration, they were trying to sue them. That case has been ongoing since July of 2025. Steve Ballmer's name was added into that lawsuit for just quote unquote keeping up the fraud by funding Aspiration. And Ballmer himself has been trying to get that case thrown out because he does not want to get subpoenaed by the feds. You already know when that happens, all the financials, the emails, the communications with Sanberg, especially coming out of that Clippers building, is going to get exposed. And Adam Silver cannot protect his ass, as well as that law firm, Wachtell Lipton. And this is the funny thing about the NBA, the way they had this whole investigation set up. Steve Ballmer is the one that was responsible for any expenses throughout this whole investigation on himself. Let's keep that in mind. But going back to the timeline after the June 30th ruling that the lawsuit against Joe Sanberg and Steve Ballmer could go forward, July 6th, Kawhi Leonard fires his agent, gets rid of his uncle. Then on July 9th, the Raptors surprised the NBA world by making a trade for Kawhi Leonard. But peep this, just a few days later, the trade was put on hold. Listen right here as Pablo Torre, he did not even put up a podcast episode. He just instantly went live on his phone and gave a nice clue for those of us that was wondering why.
I just think I need to spell this out. The reason the Toronto Raptors are not finalizing this trade with the Los Angeles Clippers for Kawhi Leonard is because they are concerned that Kawhi Leonard did something that is worthy of punishment by the NBA. The NBA, by the way, which has told the Toronto Raptors, buyer beware, apparently. It is now official, buyer beware. Any penalties that Kawhi Leonard incurs as a part of this investigation, that is a risk that the Raptors and the Raptors alone assume. The Clippers don't assume that penalty for Kawhi Leonard. The buyer does. The Raptors do. And the Raptors are saying, well, then we cannot do it, which says so much about the credibility of the alleged cap circumvention scheme involving Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers in Aspiration that we've been reporting on for 11 months. The same allegations, by the way, that the Raptors have been circling since 2019 when they became the most aggrieved party in this whole story. And now they are saying we can't trade for this guy under these conditions because we think it is quite possible that there is actually something that he did worth punishing. That's what the meaning of this frozen trade really is. And then there's the second part, which is that the Los Angeles Clippers have leaked to Shams Charania a 5-paragraph statement. The Raptors had 3 sentences. Clippers had 5 paragraphs, and this is one of them. At the heart of this investigation are Joe Sanberg and Aspiration. We did not funnel money to Kawhi Leonard through Aspiration. Like many sophisticated investors, financial institutions, and business partners, we were victims of a fraud initiated by Sanberg, who has been convicted and sentenced to 14 years in prison.
Now, before I let Pablo continue, notice right there how the Clippers organization blamed Sanberg. And we also hear about his 14-year prison sentence. That ruling right there is after he cooperated with not only the NBA, but also the feds. In my opinion, I believe because he cooperated and this is a financial crime, he did not expect to do 14 years. And this right here is where things even get scarier. Guess who got on the stand after a bunch of witnesses and just people who were involved where their lives were impacted because of the outcome of this fraud? We also got to include Steve Ballmer. He gave statements against his boy. And later on in this segment, we're going to see how Steve Ballmer not only has been funding nonprofits that Joe Sanberg has been in charge of way before he owned the Clippers, he did it even after the Aspiration fraud in 2024. Once again, I'm going to add additional timelines. In the 2023-24 season, the Clippers terminated their agreement with Aspiration. And then a few months later, by July 18th of 2024, Bloomberg began to drop bombshells accusing Aspiration of just being a complete fraud. Crazy shit right there, but it gets even scarier because by the end of that very year of 2024, by the time it hit December, Steve Ballmer gave additional money to Joe Sanberg in a complete separate nonprofit. Oh, we're going to get into it later with that, but let's continue hearing from Pablo right here.
But the entire thing we've been saying over 11 months almost is that you can be scammed by Joe Sanberg and also have worked with him to try to deceive the NBA. You can be deceived by the guy you trusted to help you deceive the NBA's salary cap circumvention system. In fact, it's what the federal whistleblower complaint that we obtained, that was filed under penalty of perjury in 2023, filed by 2 Aspiration whistleblowers who provided the whole roadmap for the prosecution of Joe Sanberg to the federal government, has indicated. And so did the DOJ prosecutor who launched that federal investigation. 2 things can be true. You got scammed by Joe, and you tried to use him to get one over on the NBA. So the question now, given all these things I've said, is what changed after June 30th when this trade was publicly announced? What changed between June 30th and July 9th?
What changed between those dates is exactly what the media is not talking about. The outcome of the Karr versus Sanberg case that started back in July of 2025. Steve Ballmer's name got added in November of 2025 to that lawsuit, and ever since he's been trying to get it thrown out because he understands it exposes him to possibly get subpoenaed by the feds. That's going to open up everything behind the scenes with the Clippers, emails, financial transactions, as well as all the other entities that Steve Ballmer has. They're trying to find any communication link between him and Sanberg because that is the accusations in that lawsuit. So again, June 30th, that case was ruled that it can go forward involving Ballmer. Then on July 6th, Kawhi fired not only his uncle, also his agent. A few days later, the trade was made between the Raptors and Clippers for Kawhi, and then the NBA by July 9th had put it on hold. Matter of fact, Pablo Torre went live the next day on July 10th, giving the hints out what changes happened in the last 10 days. And this is now where we're going to hear the exact details of this case. And for those of you that are watching the visual version, we got the fucking paperwork. Once again, we're taking you off your daily algorithms and getting into some more nuanced shit because this case right here is what the NBA media is refusing to bring up because they understand it exposes Ballmer to the feds, and Adam Silver and Wachtell Lipton, that law firm, cannot protect him. Not only they're not going to risk their reputation, they don't even have jurisdiction to protect him from just all his back-end dealings, emails, text messages, bank transfers from being put out there. So as we pull up the paperwork for the Karr versus Sanberg case where Steve Ballmer's name has been attached to that lawsuit, we could see Aspiration had rebranded themselves and now they go by the name of Katona. But just listen to the accusations. Remember, the judge had approved for this case to go forward. All this happened after Steve Ballmer had actually gave statements against his boy Sanberg. We gotta wonder, a guy like that doing financial crimes who cooperated, he didn't expect to get 14 years. So there might be some animosity right there, especially he's a middle-aged man. I believe he's in his late 50s. To get 14 years? Shit, who knows? The get back could be real, and he might want to take Steve Ballmer down. Let's listen to some of the accusations on the paperwork.
By 2021, Katona was running out of money and needed a deep-pocket benefactor, and along came Steve Ballmer. Sanberg made a crooked deal with Ballmer, the billionaire owner of the NBA's Los Angeles Clippers, to provide financial support and promote Katona to investors such as plaintiffs. The arrangement was that Ballmer would be an investor in Katona, and in return, Ballmer would use Katona to secretly funnel millions of dollars to star NBA player Kawhi Leonard. These funds would be channeled through Katona to Leonard so that Ballmer could induce Leonard to re-sign with the Clippers by covertly paying him more than allowed by the NBA's salary cap rules. Sanberg and Ballmer worked together to make Katona appear to be a successful company backed by Ballmer, who is one of the wealthiest people in the world, worth over $150 billion. With Ballmer's knowledge, support, and assistance, Sanberg and Ballmer promoted Katona to lend legitimacy to Katona's operations, and Ballmer publicly endorsed Katona. This enticed investors like plaintiffs to entrust in and keep their capital in Katona, and helped hide the rampant fraud occurring at the company.
Now, before we continue hearing more, I'm going to include a few links in the description below as we went over the payment schedules of how Aspiration never had enough money to even give Kawhi and his uncle what they agreed to. The wire transfers, not only from the Clippers, but as well as from Ballmer's other entities funding Aspiration, as it was going through multiple probes from the feds, the IRS. Shit gets crazy. But we got the timelines, the paperwork, the scheduling. It's fucking wild. But let's continue to hear some more of the accusations in the paperwork.
It also served Ballmer's interest in getting extra money to Leonard so he could circumvent the salary cap, beat out the competition, and re-sign his team's superstar player. Ballmer was complicit in and aided and abetted Sanberg's fraud for his own self-serving purpose. Ballmer publicly endorsed Cadona and infused over $50 million into the company. Absent Ballmer's support, Cadona could not have sustained the fraud set forth herein. Sanberg's scheme also included borrowing millions of dollars using phony financial statements and artificially inflating the value of Cadona. Sanberg generated phony revenue for Cadona, funneling his funds through others who would purport to be genuine customers of Cadona and purchase sustainability products, typically carbon credits. These were sham customers. Sanberg himself was the true source of these purchases.
So this pending case with all these accusations since July of 2025 and Steve Ballmer's name being added in November of 2025 is the reason why Adam Silver has been jammed up of not coming to a conclusion. Within that lawsuit, the investors had made a criminal complaint originally just against Sanberg. Matter of fact, I'm gonna read it right here. On June 30th, the ruling determined that the fraud claims belong to the individual investors rather than the bankruptcy estate, allowing a high-profile California lawsuit to proceed. The company Aspirations Holdings filed for bankruptcy Chapter 11 in March of 2025 after federal authorities filed a criminal complaint against its founder. And in that ruling, the bankruptcy trustee had attempted to halt the investors and try to have the state take over. But the judge had rejected the trustee's motion, ruling that the automatic stay in a state jurisdiction did not apply to these individual claims. This is what really got Adam Silver and the NBA caught up right here, just taking so long to come to a ruling with this Steve Ballmer cap circumvention. They already know if the feds get involved, there's going to be a lot more that's going to get exposed, and their reputations are on the line. But again, Steve Ballmer, he has been good for NBA business. That's their fucking real dilemma. Make no mistake about it, Silver is working overtime to not only get this situation handled, but he wants Ballmer involved in the league going forward. It's been good for business, and this is why we seen him kind of cozy up to Trump. And that's not by mistake, as right here we're going to tie this all in. There's a reason why Silver has been cozying up to Trump, because he's really the only person that can get this shit thrown out. As we all know, the NBA media, as well as the media at large, overall they tend to lean to the left, and they've been very shocked of Adam Silver's change of tune when it comes to Trump. Now check out Adam Silver right here before Game 2 of the NBA Finals, as he was asked by a media member, almost kind of bringing up Trump's presence as an inconvenience, and Silver does a complete 180, especially with the temperament he had for Trump back in 2016, and now he kind of welcomes him in to the NBA and just lets it be known that his presence isn't an inconvenience. Once again, check out the way the media member asked the question, because he sort of implies that Trump's presence is a complete inconvenience and it's not wanted. And Silver goes out of his way to throw that Uno card.
And then also, when you have a place that's as big as New York City, hasn't had a finals in so long, how painstaking has it been for the NBA to prepare for the crowds, the people partying outside watching the game, the crazy fans, maybe unique people deciding to attend the game? Like, how much preparation have you guys done on that regard, and is it still a work in progress?
Yeah, I just say I don't view that part of the job as painstaking. I think it's a really enjoyable part of the job. I happen to live, as I said, in New York City, and so I'm seeing it every day. And yes, viewing parties, things the Knicks are putting together, things that the league is helping with, but the great news, games are on broadcast television. Obviously, there's only so many tickets to these games. It's frustrating that more people can't get in the buildings and more people can't get the buildings at lower prices, but markets are markets.
Again, Adam Silver working overtime, boy, because Donald Trump is the only one that can save Steve Ballmer from getting subpoenaed by the feds in that Karr versus Sanberg case. Check out Silver once again during Game 3 talking about Trump. The tone is completely different, especially when you have a president for the most part, for a lot of corporations in America in the last few years, it's been a I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back kind of atmosphere.
Let me ask you too, not only as if the Knicks and the Spurs were not enough, you have the president who's going to be in attendance tonight. What were the machinations and the behind the scenes there in terms of should he come to the game? Do they talk to you about does the president wants to come to the game? How does all of that work?
I found out because Jim Dolan invited him to the game, and he said yes, and he's welcome to be here. I think that what makes sports so special, especially when there's so much that divides people, is it's something that we have in common, and we should look for those things that we have in common and build off that. And I'll also say about President Trump, you know, I've been with the league for a long time. I ran NBA Entertainment years ago. He did an I Love Kids game spot with us. He was a fixture at NBA at Madison Square Garden. You guys remember, well, all of you, when you played here, not Draymond, but back in the old days, he had courtside seats. He was here all the time. He was at drafts, so he's a genuine Knicks fan. And so, yes, there's some inconvenience to the fans here, but one looking around this arena, it's packed. So people listen, they came early, they got through whatever extra security, which is necessary. So, as I said, I think we should be using sports to create more of a sense of community with people, not less.
That was one hell of a way for him to tap dance around that and just not acknowledge the elephant in the room. The Knicks fans overall waited over 50 years for this. Outside of their arena, whether they play there or not, has been turned up every single night. And for Trump to come through in their very first finals game in well over 20 plus years, it was inconvenient. But again, in that very same night, Adam Silver had to have his best pitch with Donald Trump, because what we all didn't know was they were waiting on the outcome of that Karr versus Sanberg case that would expose their wealthiest owner, Steve Ballmer, to possibly get subpoenaed by the feds. Now all the emails of the Clippers are exposed, the transactions that they make, some of the paper trails of Ballmer's outside entities, which Adam Silver doesn't even have the reach to kind of investigate. Those things will be exposed because they're looking for any communication he had with Sanberg. But listen to President Trump, because you already know, he knows what it is. This is a transaction for him. It's almost like Adam Silver has approached him like he's a genie trying to make a wish. But just listen to Trump as he kind of alludes to Silver's bending at the knee. And we know Trump does not forget his enemies. Everyone knows how the NBA had a different energy towards him back in 2016.
Commissioner Silver, he came over to pay his respects. You know, as president, he came over. We talked a little bit about the NBA and about the game, and the game's changed. I said it's gotten rougher, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. It's gotten rougher. When you look at the way they guard people now, I don't remember them doing that 10 years ago. And he knows a lot about basketball, but it's good. It's good for the game.
Do you think the NBA has turned away from the left wing stuff that they were getting criticized for?
Well, it's a little left wing. Yeah, I think so. It tends to be a little bit left wing, but it's great entertainment. Great.
Hey, right there, even the report acknowledges the NBA was very left wing, especially towards you back in 2016. Once again, Trump does not forget his enemies. But now a lot of them, including Disney, Apple, have all bent the knee. Even ESPN, when they tried to do that deal with the NFL, these entities were very nervous about just possibly being viewed as mini monopolies. So being buddy-buddy with Trump has been very beneficial for the very same companies that try to take a stand and brand themselves a certain way to get certain favoring with audiences. And I'm always saying throughout this show, in the business world, there's no such thing as woke. They play both sides. Whoever's the winner in politics and has the power is who they're going to side with. But going back to that case that's up Steve Ballmer's ass, he's trying to get it thrown out. It didn't work. You snitched on your boy Joe Sanberg. He not only cooperated with the feds as well as the NBA, but he still got 14 years in jail. And for a billionaire like Ballmer, who said, oh, I got conned, it's very hard for the viewing audience to sympathize for a billionaire, for the most part, who has always had his way. This whole cap circumvention in a way kind of shows us how these tech oligarchs operate behind the scenes in order to get things going in their business's favor. Ballmer has gone through unprecedented amounts of money just to get an NBA superstar in a sport that's really a team concept in order to win. So just imagine what he's doing for Microsoft behind the scenes. But again, going back to his relationship with Joe Sanberg, a man who's in his 50s now is about to do a 14-year bid. Ballmer has given statements in court going against him, saying that he's been conned. But Pablo Torre dug into the archives and found another nonprofit that Ballmer had funded, headed by Joe Sanberg, after Aspiration had completely fell apart. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
And so, what I went to go do was learn more about the Golden State Opportunity Foundation. But when I went to the Where We Started section of the Golden State Opportunity Foundation's website, this is what I saw.
Not found. Sorry, that page was not found.
Which was weird. It's weird, right? And so what I did was I went to the trusty old Internet Archive, a journalist's best friend.
Wayback Machine.
The Wayback Machine. And this, Amin, is what a cached version of the page used to read as recently as November 2024.
Golden State Opportunity founder Joseph Sanberg grew up in circumstances familiar to many Californians. Raised by a single mom who struggled to make ends meet on her public school teacher salary, Joe's family lost their home to foreclosure after falling deeply into debt.
And it goes on. And it is a tremendous story.
In case anyone was wondering, maybe it's another Joseph Sanberg.
That's the picture on the page that was erased.
Folks, I had a whole thing. I was going to do the Southern lawyer accent. I was going to push back.
Now you've just dropped. We're just talking in our actual voices now.
Completely broken character.
None other than disgraced Aspiration co-founder Joe Sanberg is in fact the founder of the Golden State Opportunity Foundation. This is his charity. It's his baby. And it's a fact that is verified, by the way, by the organization's Form 990 IRS filings, which also list him as the longtime board chair. You can find references to Joe Sanberg's role in this organization all over his Wikipedia page, easily Googleable articles, interviews about his ambitions in democratic politics. And so the relevant question, I suppose, would be this. When did the Ballmer Group decide to give yet another seven-figure infusion of cash to an entity founded by Joe Sanberg? Is that the Ballmer Group announced this grant as part of a larger roundup of grants in December of 2024.
Once again, for those of you watching the visual version, I'll put a timeline of all the fuckery the Aspiration has been going through ever since 2022, including the fact that the Clippers, by the time it was a 23-24 season, terminated their deal with Aspiration. January 18, 2024, Bloomberg had did a probe under Aspiration, and then by the time it was July 18, 2024, Bloomberg already called them frauds. So for it to be December of 2024, yet another nonprofit headed by Joe Sanberg, and Steve Ballmer continues to give money to him, we all know that's his boy.
December 24 was a month after the last recorded mention of Joe Sanberg on the charity's website, which we showed you. It was a couple of months after the arrest of Joe Sanberg's co-conspirator, Ibrahim al-Husseini, by the FBI. It was almost a year after Bloomberg publicly broke the story of the government's investigation into Aspiration. It was more than a year after the Clippers claimed to end their partnership with Aspiration, and dozens of Aspiration employees had been interviewed by the federal government. In other words, well beyond the point when Steve Ballmer would have learned that he was humiliated and defrauded and victimized by Joe Sanberg. As he keeps on saying, Steve Ballmer's charity, the Ballmer Group, appears to have donated around December 2024, according to the public records of his own internal database, $1.875 million to that same fraudster for the first time.
Now remember, Steve Ballmer keeps saying, I got conned. It's almost in the same vein as when he first came into the NBA and he was like, Larry O.B. Both of those things is part of the same bullshit. He never gave a fuck about no Larry O.B. The truth is the Clippers actually allowed Ballmer to almost purchase half of downtown LA by USC. Not only he owns that arena that got built, he also was able to purchase the land directly from the state. So whether he's part of the NBA or not, he's going to be getting paid with that prime real estate.
Golden State Opportunity, what is it? 10th anniversary. There it is. 10th anniversary. They've been around for a long time, Pablo. A long time. They've been doing good work, right?
That's right.
And also the Ballmer Group, you said they've given out $400 million. He doesn't know. It's like loose change in his couch cushions. They just we gave it something called the Golden State Foundation. Golden State Opportunity. Sounds great.
It's true. It's true that $1.875 million was approximately, doing the math here, worth 0.0014% of Steve Ballmer's estimated net worth at the time. And so, in fairness, we put this in front of the Clippers and the Ballmer Group and the Golden State Opportunity Foundation. I wanted to know what this $1.875 million was used for and why it was $1.875 million. Maybe, this foundation has done and continues to do good work, but the timing of this donation is something that, just to me, would defy, what's that phrase again about explanation?
Cannot rationally be explained.
That's right. As source number one from the finance department at Aspiration also points out.
Am I taking crazy pills? It's just inconceivable to me to be both hoodwinked and bamboozled, but yet continuously giving money to Joe Sanberg. I don't know how to make that make sense in my mind.
Well, I want to anticipate the possibility that Steve Ballmer really believed in the mission of the Golden State Opportunity Foundation, Joe Sanberg's baby, the thing that he was the head of. And so maybe there is an art versus the artist sort of distinction he's drawing.
No, it does not make any iota of sense to invest in 2021, contribute nearly $100 million in carbon offset pre-purchases, reinvest in 2022 or 2023 round, claim all of that to be lost in 2023, and then come back for more in 2024.
So right there, you're hearing from a source that used to work for Aspiration. Everything they just stated right there is exactly what could get exposed if the feds subpoena Steve Ballmer. The Karr versus Sanberg case is very important because it does open up that line that never existed before. These are boundaries that the NBA cannot even reach towards, even with that famous law firm that they're using. Again, Pablo Torre has put on a master class into dog walking Adam Silver and Steve Ballmer into a corner that they cannot fucking get out of. If the NBA comes down with a judgment a little bit too fast, their reputation could be stained forever.
And then come back for more in 2024 via charitable donation. Maybe Steve Ballmer's a secret masochist.
That is honestly one of the most persuasive theories that anyone has offered at this point in the reporting. Yeah, Steve Ballmer's kink is being robbed.
Yeah. Rob me blind, daddy.
Hey, if Steve Ballmer continues fucking around, he gonna be saying that exact line in jail. Yo, next to his boy, Mr. Joe Sanberg. And again, we tied multiple layers to this whole fiasco. We're sort of getting an idea of how much an NBA star is truly worth to his franchise, especially in a league today where stars are taking pay cuts just to compete for a championship. Look at Wemby, Jalen Brunson. The list is going to keep on growing. At the same time, the league and the type of owners that are coming in, the money is growing for them. Also on the media side, why is there such light coverage with this whole situation? Pablo Torre is only a one-man show and he's digging deep into the crates. So fans are seeing for the first time, the coverage around the league is very compromised. Also, we're seeing why Adam Silver had a change of tone with Donald Trump, as he is the only person that can stop the feds from going through Steve Ballmer's personal emails, lines of communication with Joe Sanberg. And with that ruling that came down on June 30th, Ballmer is now exposed to this situation. So there's a lot of different things here at play. But last but not least, I thought it was very interesting to hear from two NBA insiders who normally get votes for MVP awards or just all NBA teams And even they are confused about what's going on within their industry. The fact that Pablo Torre receives one of the highest awards for journalism when there's a case that's not necessarily wrapped up. They gave great insight to how this was very unusual for their industry. But yet, for two veteran NBA reporters, they did not discuss at any moment the outcome of the Karr versus Sanberg case, which completely flipped this whole fiasco upside down. Once again, we're living in very interesting times. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
It's also gotten messier. The Athletic just reported, was it yesterday, 2 days ago, that there could be a second no-show endorsement deal, that there are questions now about a secondary sort of endorsement company sponsor, thank you. And now they're investigating that.
And the timing of them making the announcement of that investigation came just a few days later on July 14th. So July 30th, that Karr versus Sanberg ruling came down. Kawhi Leonard, July 6th, fired his agent. And then that trade between the Clippers and the Raptors got put on hold by July 9th. Very interesting, the league happened to throw a nice distraction saying that, oh, we're investigating a possible second quote-unquote secret deal with Kawhi.
Are we in a position where there's so much pressure to wrap up this investigation that there's going to be a major stone left unturned? Where am I in terms of where we are now? I am shocked it has taken this long. I understand that lawyers do a lot of lawyering and there's a lot of, T's to cross and I's to dot, but I'm sorry. I don't know why, especially for the amount of money I can only imagine the league is spending on this investigation, why this hasn't been someone's everyday. And there are enough lawyers at this law firm that you could have put 1,000 of them on this, right?
And there's also enough quote-unquote NBA journalists out there that should know the reason why she's asking this question right here is because of the outcome of the Karr versus Sanberg case that came down on June 30th. Once again, this whole fiasco exposes a lot of different things, including the fact that NBA media right now is very compromised. Matter of fact, the details of their gambling deals are even more concerning, as they make a lifetime commission off their audience losing.
There are enough lawyers at this law firm that you could have put 1,000 of them on this, right? And had this done in half the time. If they had 500 people on this, if they had 100 people on this, whatever it is, you could double it and have it done in half the time, or et cetera, et cetera. I don't know why it was allowed to take this long. I certainly would have pressed for it to
I don't think they
quicker.
anticipated it taking this long. I think they thought maybe 6 months before the end of the
charge.
season. Right, but what do you think of Adam's point that, he said, I can tell them to stop at any time?
Sure, but that we might be getting to that point. He says it's got to be done. I don't know when the calendar turns on when this trade would have to be decided or when they feel like they would have to make this decision, but it's coming. And if it's coming, that means that possibly there's a whole new wrinkle of this investigation that could be pretty significant that might just not even get investigated. It's already embarrassing to me that a Pulitzer Prize has been awarded for a media investigation into this, and the official investigation still hasn't even wrapped up. It's not that the media investigation happened and the official one hasn't. We've already gotten to the point where a Pulitzer has been awarded into that first investigation, meaning that it was deemed journalistically sound enough by some of the greatest experts in the history of journalism.
Sheesh. We're getting some insights right here of how unusual it was for Pablo Torre to get that award, and the investigation is still ongoing. That also shows you how compromised their industry has become. For the most part, the business model now is to link up with a gambling company and have an on-air personality like Stephen A. Smith just spit out a bunch of hot takes, hiding behind anonymous sources, and when shit gets too hot, they try to hide behind these quote-unquote ethics. Oh, I'm a journalist. Get the fuck out of here.
We've already gotten to the point where a Pulitzer has been awarded into that first investigation, meaning that it was deemed journalistically sound enough by some of the greatest experts in the history of journalism that it was at least a journalistically sound investigation into problems and potential issues here, and that the league still hasn't been able to come back and say there's a there or not. I think that is problematic, and I don't think it's I'm not saying it's Adam Silver's fault. It's not his fault. He's got a big job with a lot of things to do. But I don't know. Am I hiring, no offense to the fine people of Wachtell, but I know they are the go-to investigative firm for both the NFL and the NBA. The next time there's an investigation, if I'm interviewing law firms, I might say, hey, buddy, how quickly are we going to get this done?
You know what? It wouldn't shock me if Wachtell ends up dropping the NBA as a client if they're put in a position where their reputation could be on the line. Once again, the league has it set up where Steve Ballmer is paying all the expenses for his own investigation, while at the same time there's other cases going on that could open things up for the feds to subpoena not only Steve Ballmer, but also the Clippers. So if they come to a conclusion too fast and give him a light slap on the ass and just a small fine and maybe a few draft picks, and the feds then open up the paperwork and show the audience, the viewing audience especially, that the credibility of the league as well as that law firm is in question, it's fucking over. You can't recover from that. But once again, as NBA voters, right here, Rachel Nichols, as well as Chris Mannix, they seem like they're not aware of some of the outside cases that are going on, because this shit is buried deep and it's not by mistake.
I agree with
because
that.
I want it done right, but it can get done right at different speeds.
I think he has no choice now.
Mr. Wachtell might have some explaining to do.
I think Adam's got no choice now but to let this thing play out, because he has got to get the full, unvarnished, uninterrupted report at this point. Because if the result of this report is that he is going to, well, if the result though of this report is that he is going to submit the Clippers to some kind of serious punishment, he knows that there is probably going to be a fight coming from the 13th richest man in the world. A guy that has the best lawyers on the planet. A guy that is going to be armed to the teeth and potentially ready to fight for years, to drag the NBA into a multi-million, multi-billion perhaps lawsuit. Like that, whatever percentage you want to put in that happening, that at least has the potential of happening.
Now, when you look at the situation with Pablo Torre, he's one independent guy. So if a lot of the accusations and just paperwork trail that he has left was false, you would think Ballmer would completely not only bury his career, but he would completely destroy his whole media existence. The fact that he has not done that yet is because he already understands that if he sues Pablo, he could open himself up to get subpoenaed. And once again, all the paperwork from the Clippers, the emails, all the trails have to come to light. And they do not want that, because more than likely, we might see some shit that they never wanted us to see, allegedly. Let's just leave it at that.
At this point, as frustrated as the NBA is, as frustrated as clearly Adam is, frustrated as people are to be dealing with this still after almost a year of this initial reporting coming out, I don't think he has a choice anymore. He has to follow this thing all the way through.
The point you make about Steve Ballmer has always and will continue to be true. Regardless of what shows up in that report, Steve Ballmer has the legal right to take them to court over it. And he could, with all of his money and lawyers and everything else, drag this out for years, regardless of what's in that report. That report could show photos of him handing Kawhi Hamburglar style, like a grab a thing of money, a brown sack with a big dollar sign on it, and he could still take them to court for years. So that is something that the league is balancing. There's an implied power here that Ballmer has, that the league is going to be balancing. There's certainly talk of, we see sports leagues do this all the time, they try to end around that reality by saying, we are basically going to enter into a plea bargain with one of our own owners and say, we have met, we have talked about the evidence in front of us, we have agreed together that this is the correct punishment, and therefore there is not going to be a challenge, there is not going to be a thing. The Players Association does this too, right?
Now, all the stuff right here Rachel Nichols is talking about sounds fine and dandy. But that ruling on June 30th with the Karr versus Sanberg case has fucked it up. They cannot do that anymore, because now the door has been opened for the feds, government, state, whoever, to subpoena Ballmer and the Clippers. Adam Silver's trump card to avoid all this, so they can get to a point where they can do the same things she was just referring to, is to get that situation handled. And that's what Steve Ballmer, since November 2025, trying to get that case thrown out. Who knows? Donald Trump might be the only one that could come to the rescue.
right? They talk and we're not going to challenge it because there has seemed to have been a backroom conversation.
Coming to that,
I see that being the more likely scenario of how this ends. The question is, how much power do both? That's a negotiation.
Yeah.
And how much power do both sides have going into that negotiation? The league's power, the other 29, currently at 29 other owners' power, is what's in that report. But Ballmer's power is still going to be that he has all of this real-life world financial and political and legal power, and that's going to be part of this. And I think the fact that the longer this has gone on, the Athletic report, and I have no reason to believe it's not true, if there really is enough evidence of a secondary possible end around, whether it actually happened or not, it's got to be investigated out. And if it's taken 10 months for the first one to be investigated out, how are you telling me that the second one is going to be thoroughly enough done, that we're also going to be done
being investigated
this summer?
right now. Like, we don't know what they're doing there. They might have already pulled on that thread a little bit.
You are potentially, the longer it goes on, the more you are opening up to accusations from all sides of this got dragged out to give the Clippers a break, this got dragged out but then hurried up at the end and wasn't completely, the Clippers got a break that way because it wasn't thoroughly investigated out.
Once again, we're casually listening to two NBA media veterans right here. They have a lot of sway within the league, who gets awards. They have a lot of relationships, but yet it's amazing how they're completely clueless about the cases that are around this whole Aspiration and Kawhi situation. The NBA, as well as that law firm, whatever ruling they're about to come down on, has to take a pause. Because if Steve Ballmer gets subpoenaed, the reach not only into Ballmer's emails and other entities and just lines of communication is going to far reach of what the NBA and that law firm could ever see. Reputations are on the line.
The Raptors got screwed, the Raptors didn't get screwed. I don't know how they can penalize Kawhi Leonard without getting into an actual legal fight with the Players Association. Because if you sit there and say, we are getting into the endorsement contracts of you players, an area which until this point we have had no jurisdiction, you are going to have a fight on your hands because that is where their real money comes from.
Once again, that ruling on June 30th has allowed that jurisdiction to happen outside of the NBA. And they do not want that paper trail to be seen. And from what Pablo Torre has shown so far, there's a lot of emails linking the two. But because the NBA only has a jurisdiction to reach in and find out what happened within that Clipper building, they can't necessarily dig into Ballmer's other entities.
And I can't imagine that that's not going to be a legal fight there. So there is a lot that has to be litigated and balanced here. And it's not just when the report comes back. Then Adam Silver has got to figure out what his decision is. There's supposed to be an arbitration process, I believe, written into these rules.
This is why I find it hard to believe that unless there is some kind of agreement between all parties, which I think would be best case scenario for the
that is,
NBA.
I'm sure, what everybody wants. That is typically what a sports
where
league
it's like
wants.
The Clippers can find some way to save face where Ballmer doesn't get suspended, somebody gets axed, they lose a draft pick, they can say,
This happened
we
without
didn't
his
know, but you
knowledge."
know what, in the interest of moving forward,
Right, this happened within the organization without my knowledge. We're
Right.
going to whatever, X, Y, and Z.
plausible deniability
Yeah.
from the Clippers. If that happens, it's best case scenario. But the Clippers, in all their public statements, they seem very dug in. That
They
they're
are.
not going to accept any responsibility for anything
They
that
did
may or
anything
may
wrong.
not have happened with all this. And I asked this of Adam, Adam, how can you get a report? Let's say you get the report next week.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a big report.
Yeah.
That is going to be
you
multi-volume,
made a great point
thousands
there.
of pages. You are not going to be able to digest that in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then once you digest it, then you're going to come to the conclusion of whether or not you're going to penalize. If you do penalize, how severe are you going to, this feels like something. The next Board of Governors meeting, I think, is in January or September. This feels like something that could still be unresolved in September.
Oh, it's going to be unresolved in September. Oh, yeah, it's going to be unresolved. And if Silver gets more buddy-buddy with Trump and gets his way, hell, it could be resolved.
It really feels that
But
way.
when would again, Mr. League machinations, which I know nothing about, when would this Kawhi Leonard deal or not deal have to be?
I don't think it has to be finalized at any point.
Well, I mean, it does. Obviously, they could just say, okay, we're not doing this, we're going home.
Well, they could say they're going home, but I think they can always...
For it to be salvaged, when would it have to be salvaged by?
Well, I don't think, I mean, it hasn't really been...
There's no...
Yeah, there's no
It
date
could happen
there.
in
Like,
November?
they've agreed to the terms of this deal.
It could
They haven't
happen in
final-
December?
It could happen anytime, yeah.
Okay.
They could do it. Now, if Kawhi winds up getting punished with suspension, obviously the Raptors will say, we're going to revisit some of this and let's maybe tinker with the deal a little bit.
I don't understand how this contract that they're trading right now could be null and void, because it's not even the contract we're talking about. Isn't it 2 contracts ago?
It's 2 contracts ago, yeah.
So, like, I am a little bit confused.
Yeah.
We're all confused because that trade might have been a smokescreen to kind of deviate the media as well as the NBA audience from that ruling on June 30th. And the fact that Kawhi Leonard on June 6th fired his uncle and agent. It's a lot of things going on. June 14th, the league throws in another monkey wrench. Oh, we're investigating possible second endorsement deal. But at the end of the day, that ruling on June 30th exposed Steve Ballmer as well as the Clippers, aka the NBA, into their lines of communications through emails, text messages, anything that goes on in that building to the feds. And that's what Adam Silver, Steve Ballmer, and that law firm that they're using do not want. But hey, we'll see. These are definitely interesting times. And if I was an NBA superstar on a team, I'll be reevaluating taking that pay cut, because low key, Steve Ballmer showing the true worth of an NBA superstar to a team. I mean, you could check out in my previous segments. I'll link in the description below, but we've gone over and counted well over $400 million Steve Ballmer has spent in order to keep up this whole aspiration facade. And most of that was the money outside of paying Kawhi. Again, interesting times that we're living in right now. So every once in a while, it's always great to take you off your daily algorithms and get into some more nuanced topics. As right here, we're going to get into a multi-layer segment with Masai Ujiri taking over in Dallas. He's finally cleaning up house, as Jason Kidd is one of the last leftovers of the many people Mark Cuban had just kind of overstepping their boundaries as far as trying to gain power within the organization. And in this segment, we're going to see how Jason Kidd had a lot more to do with Luka getting traded out of Dallas. Keep in mind, Jason Kidd does have a track record of just trying to supersede his power than just being the head coach. That fallout with the Brooklyn Nets back in 2014 even somehow got them to get 2 second-round picks to send their head coach to Milwaukee. And that was only after Jason Kidd's first ever season as far as being a head coach. Once again, in this segment, we're going to see a correlation to him just trying to grab that power, and also Mark Cuban just having too many voices within the Mavericks building doing the same. J. Kidd just last summer signed a brand new extension and still had 4 years and $45 million left. It says a lot that Masai Ujiri, with the blessings of the owner, was still able to let him go. Now this right here is going to serve as a nice backdrop to start off this segment, as we're going to hear from Shams speak to Pat McAfee on some of the dynamics that played out with J. Kidd's firing. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
For them to move off of Jason Kidd right now, Pat, they're eating 4 years and almost $45 million to get off of Jason Kidd and essentially wash their hands of the situation. This is all because team leadership wants a clean start. Forget anyone involved with just the Luka Dončić trade. We've seen Patrick Dumont, the owner, essentially flush away anyone that was even around the Mark Cuban regime, right? Nico Harrison, Jason Kidd, they were all brought in by Mark Cuban. Luka Dončić, a Mark Cuban guy. The only Mark Cuban guy left on that team right now is Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is a generational player, generational talent. Masai Ujiri did his press conference today, and he said, we want to see Kyrie Irving and Cooper Flagg on the court together. But there's no question. There's multiple contenders around the NBA that are very much monitoring what Kyrie Irving's future is right now with the Mavericks, whether it's this summer, whether it's into the season. But that's all going to play out over the course of the year. There's no question Jason Kidd, anyone else in that organization, where they were at with the Luka Dončić of it all, maybe that didn't play a factor in people's firings, but certainly from an informational perspective, from a position of like, that's good background context. There's an investigation to an extent that you have to do when you come into an organization. So there's the infighting that's been going on internally there. There's been so much toxicity around that organization that now Masai Ujiri is inheriting.
And that's the first good move Patrick Dumont has made since taking over the Dallas Mavericks, is to get rid of all that Mark Cuban energy. And this is the part of the segment where it's about to get revealed on some of those exact dynamics. Power struggles, having too many voices in the room. There's just so much trickle down from the behind the scenes toxicity that Mark Cuban sort of cultivated within the Mavericks. Tim McMenamin right here gives us great insight to a lot of these dynamics, and it makes sense of why there was sort of such confusion in regards to the Luka trade. It looked like the chain of command was just so broken, it even made Patrick Dumont look crazy, and he just took over. But again, we're going to get into it because this is all a domino effect, and you add on top of that having a coach like Jay Kidd, who has history as a head coach in previous organizations trying to gain extra power. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
Cuban assembled this advisory committee, Dirk Nowitzki, Casey Smith, the longtime athletic trainer, who was running their health and performance stuff, who was shockingly fired before last season, which played an underrated role in all this. Don Kalkstein, longtime Mavs sports psychologist. Keith Grant, who was a Mavs lifer until he recently retired, literally worked his way from ball boy to assistant GM. And Michael Finley was the advisory committee. They huddled in Cuban's bunker suite after Rick's resignation and basically decided during that meeting, we're going to hire Jason Kidd. And then instead of hiring a general manager, because remember, Donnie Nelson got fired and Rick resigned within days. But they decided, okay, Jason Kidd's going to be our head coach. Who would be a good GM for him to work with him? And that's what led them to Nico Harrison. At the time was running the North American basketball division at Nike. It had been involved in executive searches for other franchises. The Spurs being the one that sticks out there. But if Nico's not the GM, if Kidd's not the head coach, then I highly doubt that they end up trading Luka, despite the fact that with Luka as the centerpiece of the franchise, they went to the Western Conference Finals that year. A couple years later, they went to the NBA Finals. But what ended up happening is Nico and Jay Kidd ran out of patience with Luka Dončić, with the constant conditioning concerns, with some of the petulance and all those sort of things, despite the fact that this guy's production at his age ranks up there with anybody who you want to bring up in NBA history.
Now, Luka, despite the weight issues, was still doing his thing. But notice how early on Tim McMenamin had mentioned that there was a secret committee making major decisions. We're going to see a continuation throughout this segment of just having a culture of so many different voices without necessarily tying the responsibility of just having the power of those voices. For example, someone could be part of that committee making a major decision, but they don't receive the blame as if they were a GM or team president making that decision. And that's a trickle-down effect from Mark Cuban. He's the one that set the tone within the back rooms of the Dallas Mavericks with this kind of culture.
Look, there was a lot of strangeness going on at the time in the Mavericks organization. There was kind of a cold war between Nico and Jay Kidd that summer, coming off of the tank job. There was kind of some quiet finger pointing going on. Jay Kidd had made it clear that another one of the moves under Nico's watch he wasn't a fan of. That was the Christian Wood acquisition, the Christian Wood trade. But there was, when things go that wrong, people are going to look to, for people to blame. And I think there was some finger pointing between Jay Kidd and Nico. Casey was a right-hand man for Jay Kidd. Their relationship dated back to Jay Kidd's playing days. I kind of read that as, and other people in the organization kind of read that as Nico's way of saying, hey, I'm in charge here. So there's a little bit of that.
Now, right there, Jay Kidd was able to point the finger at Nico, even though he was higher ranked, is because of the position Mark Cuban actually put Harris in. Cuban has been on record stating that multiple times the only reason that he hired Nico Harris was to gain more access to free agents, and he didn't necessarily give them the exact powers of just being the team's general manager and president. Remember, he was both. So within that rift, there was already a layer of confusion because team president and coach should be on the same page. And right here, we're going to find out when it came to the Luka trade, those two were a lot more on code than we were led to believe.
Hey, his weight fluctuated last year when he was averaging a league-leading 34 points, 10 rebounds, 9 assists, when he led the postseason in points, rebounds, assists, and steals, never been done before, and took a team to the NBA Finals. His petulance has been a running theme. You know, the ranting at the refs and sometimes letting that affect his focus. Like, the guy his flaws are as apparent as his talent. But his talent damn sure overshadows the flaws. There's people in Dallas who think like I'm a Luka hater or like a Luka critic. You know, I've gotten like, how could you write a book about Luka? You hated on him his whole career. Like, I've covered him honestly his whole career. And, you know, I can honestly say I was as shocked. I knew how frustrated the Mavericks were with his conditioning, and I was still completely flabbergasted by the trade just because you don't give up that kind of generational talent unless he's putting the gun to your head. And he wasn't. He wasn't, despite the fraying of the relationship with Nico Harrison, and that definitely happened for a variety of reasons. Luka wanted to spend his whole career in Dallas. He wanted to have a statue out there next to Dirk's. Like, the one thing about Luka is that he does have in common with Dirk a strong sense of loyalty. And I even when I was reporting that there was fear in the organization that Luka was going to ask for a trade if they didn't get the ship turned around, you know, the year they had to tank to keep that top 10 protected pick, it wasn't out of disloyalty. It was just because, like, dude, if it's a complete failure of a franchise around you, like, how could you not consider looking elsewhere? But, you know, I included a chapter just on the Slovenian national team, and I thought that was important because that illustrates his loyalty. It's a case-by-case thing playing for your national team for almost every superstar in the league. He's an exception. And he didn't have to play for Slovenia. He had kind of his international free agency. He had a Spanish passport, had never played an official tournament for Slovenia. He could have easily hopped on the bandwagon of an established powerhouse in Spain. Never even discussed it with like his best friends, the Hernan Gomez brothers. So yeah, there's a whole lot going on here. But the idea that that Nico's thrown out there, well, we don't know if he was going to sign that Supermax. Yeah, you do. You knew he was going to. You didn't want to give it to him. This book I wrote over the course of a few summers, and I definitely began writing it with the thought that it could end with a Luka trade. I just thought, you know, like I just said, it was going to be because he was going to have to ask for a trade because the Mavericks were going to completely fail around. Like, I started writing it right after they bungled the Brunson situation.
Right.
Which, you know, coming off of conference finals, you lose the second best player for nothing. You know, there's a whole chapter on just how badly they screwed up that situation. So I don't know how much would be different as far as how I wrote the book, because it does kind of capture all the pressure, all the drama, all this function. It's just a crazy plot twist at the end. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you, like, it would be dishonest for me to be writing it and say, okay, we should have seen this coming. While Mark Cuban had control of the franchise, like, you can have the GM title. You're the GM when he wants to let you be the GM. I mean, Cuban's still running the show. And so it wasn't until midway through last season when Cuban gave up the majority share, and, you know, he said he was going to keep basketball operations control. That wasn't reality, you know. I mean, it just wasn't the case. That's when Nico was able to not only take control of basketball ops, but frankly, box Cuban out. Nico did a very intentional job of boxing out and keeping Cuban completely out of the mix. But look, like you said, the Kyrie trade, controversial at the time, didn't pay immediate dividends. They have to tank that year to keep the top 10 protected pick. But Kyrie's been phenomenal in Dallas. And Kyrie and Luka formed a great chemistry. They have a bond. You know, Kyrie really did a great job of kind of learning how to play off of Luka. Luka adapted to, you know, play faster and realize, hey, a simpler thing as a look ahead pass. You know, get the ball out of his hands, play faster. That empowers Kyrie, empowers his teammates. And that was like one of the great stories of last season, was just how much that duo clicked and how much they enjoyed each other. It's kind of an iconic image where they beat, Houston in overtime late in the season. They kind of collapsed into each other's arms, and it was a great duo. And then, Nico made moves around like the rest of the starting lineup and rotation that worked. The pick of Derek Lively, trading down to get him at 12 overall. Dude, that's a perfect pick and roll partner for Luka. Nico wants to talk about how his trades didn't work right away or weren't popular right away. He leaves out, like, they tried to give up 2 firsts for Kyle Kuzma. Okay. And then when that fell through because somehow Kuzma had a mythical no trade clause that the Wizards let him use, then he pivoted to one of those firsts is going to Daniel Gafford. One of those firsts is going for PJ Washington. But suddenly you've got this big athletic front court, all these lob targets, all these guys who can really run. Derek Jones Jr. as a minimum was a huge addition last year. And so you've surrounded Luka with this long, athletic, supporting cast that fit around him. And the whole defense wins championship thing, it's like, dude, the Mavericks had the number 1 defense in the league for the last 20 games last year. That continued into the playoffs. They didn't lose to the Celtics because their defense fell apart. And I know you can put up a low-light reel of Luka getting blown by. They lost because they didn't hit shots. And if defense wins championships, and that's it. That's the only thing you can do. That's the way we're building this team. Why'd you get Klay Thompson this summer? Like, come on, man. I know Klay's been a hell of a defender throughout the course of his career, but not coming off an Achilles and an ACL in his mid-30s. So, like, what I'm trying to tell you is Nico's plan has been very fluid, and I think he talked during his exit interview press conference about how process-oriented it is. The Luka trade was not process-oriented. The Luka trade was emotional. It was emotional, it was irrational, and it was illogical. And I can tell you for sure it was illogical because I pressed Nico on very flawed logic in the deal, and all he can say is defense wins championships.
It goes to show you how hard it is to build a team around Luka, because the Mavericks were definitely trying to get Kyle Kuzma, and the PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford move just ended up working out perfectly. Right now we're watching the Lakers trying to solve that same Rubik's Cube on what to align around Luka, especially with his pending 10-year Supermax contract, which will guarantee to put them over the luxury tax year in, year out, whether the team is good or not.
Or like, oh, you don't like the trade. We put together a championship caliber roster. You saw it for 2.5 quarters. 2.5 quarters? Brother, I saw a finals run last year. Which one makes me believe more? Come on, man. After Christmas, and that was Luka's 4th calf strain in 28 months. Same calf, left calf. And Nico definitely blamed poor conditioning for that. Luka's people said, hey, he's come back too soon from injuries, including the left heel. He's whatever. So there was this divide between Nico and Luka's camp.
And Nico was wrong about that. Luka actually came into that season in tremendous shape. Now, after that calf strain, that's where a lot of the weight gain quickly happened. But there's photos out there of that offseason. Skinny Luka was back, entering into that final year with the Mavericks.
For sure. And the level of frustration that Nico had at that time was high. By the way, Jay Kidd's was too. And, I think Jay Kidd's kind of trying to distance himself from
this.
Jay
He is.
Jay Kidd's frustration level was, I can just tell you with Luke, was also quite high. But, I was told at the time, hey, if we got to trade him, and obviously it's off the record, but they traded him now, so I'll say it. If we got to trade him, we'll trade his ass. And I'm like,
there you go. Tim McMenamin is revealing that Jay Kidd had a lot more to do with that trade than what's been led on.
No, you won't. I seriously, I rolled my eyes. I'm like, okay, you're huffing, you're puffing. You ain't blowing that house down. Give me a break. Because it's a ludicrous thing to consider. And how many times, Juan, have you been talking to somebody and they huff, they puff? They're just talking shit. They ain't going to do anything. And I thought this was one of those cases. And then 6 weeks later, my phone dings. What? They actually did it? Again, I was told, venting. We'll trade this guy if we have to. But here's the thing. You didn't have to. You didn't have to. You went to the finals months ago. Okay, the weight fluctuates. There's some defiance. I get it. It's frustrating. Typically, historic production gives a guy a little bit of leeway. And I will just say, and I kind of included this in the last chapter, There are a lot of people who are very strong defenders of Luka who have either been in that organization or remain in that organization. And I'm not going to tell you Luka's low maintenance. I'm just going to tell you on the superstar spectrum in the NBA, he's not toward the top. He's not. I mean, you can go down the list of superstars. There are several who are more high maintenance than Luka. You know, somebody in the book says, ask Miami if they'd have rather dealt with Luka or Jimmy Butler for the last few months, you know, leading up to the trade deadline. That's just one example. You don't give up that kind of talent if he's excited about spending his entire career with your franchise.
Now, that situation with Jimmy Butler and Luka is sort of correlated. Miami did not want to renegotiate Jimmy Butler's deal, even though he's up there in age, but they didn't want to extend him. Also, when you look at Luka's situation with that pending Supermax contract, that would have definitely put the new Mavericks owners into the luxury tax after spending $4 billion on that team. Us as NBA fans, we're going to see this become a trend going forward with a lot of these superstars as they continue to sign these very lucrative deals.
They could have had a decade-plus run into the future with Luka, and this is where the logic really falls apart. Nico Harrison's own words, he created a 3 to 4 year time frame. And like, forget what's happened. Obviously, the first year got blown up when Kyrie went down with a knee injury. Next year's in jeopardy. That 3 to 4 year time frame, you gave up to successfully build a contender around Luka, your first round draft capital in 27, 28, 29, and 30.
Yes, and what also gets unsaid is that all those draft picks, all those first round fucking draft picks belong to the contending teams within their conference. The Houston Rockets, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the San Antonio Spurs. All those teams are pretty much in contention mode before they even cash in on those picks.
So just as the credit card bill is coming due, your time frame ends? And then, like, how is that? And I asked Nico straight up in this, like, weird no cameras allowed roundtable thing, how is that in the best interest of the Dallas Mavericks? He just kept repeating defense wins championships. Nico's obviously, he was running Nike's North American basketball ops for a long time. That's a well-paying position. So is being a general manager of an NBA team. You know, maybe he just rides off into the sunset. I don't know. But there's, like, I was talking to somebody who's in an ownership group of another Western Conference team recently, and they basically said, I hate to say it, but this is going to be his legacy. This trade's his legacy. Like, he's never going to work in the NBA again. And like, there are people around the league who are just like, you have to fire him. Like, you that's the only way to begin the healing process with the Mavericks fan base. But Patrick Dumont is not there. He's not there yet. Now, the in Nico we trust era has ended. You know, he wants him to bring in an experienced exec, and, you know, like, I think he's realized, like, okay, we've got to have some checks and balances that weren't in place. I think this has been a very educational experience for Patrick Dumont in his first full year as an NBA governor. Also, the realization of, hey, in this world, management's not the stars. The stars are the guys on the floor. That's what this whole league revolves around. The superstars are the guys who drive business in this league, not the bosses. And honestly, like, as frankly illogical of a basketball decision as this was, I think what's going to ultimately cost Nico his job is this was a terrible, terrible business decision. I think they might lose $1 billion worth of revenue over the course of what would have been a $345 million contract. Nico convinced Patrick Dumont that Supermax deal would be a terrible investment. And look, he thinks Luka's body's going to break down. We'll see if he's right or wrong. I don't care if he suffers a major injury. Luka would have had insane trade value on that contract, just like Damian Lillard did. But where was Dame's? Dame wanted to go to MI somewhere. It wasn't MIL.
He wanted to go to MIAMI. It ended up in MIL-Walkie.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because why? Why could they do that? Because he was locked up long term. So if you wanted to trade the guy, the Supermax was your best weapon. But anyways, the bottom line, Patrick Dumont doesn't understand basketball. Okay, you like basketball, sure. He doesn't get basketball. He gets business. He gets when you're bleeding on the bottom line. And this was a disastrous business decision.
And it looks like Patrick Dumont has finally moved forward, because the hiring of Masai Ujiri signifies that, hey, he's here to clean up house and the Mavericks could finally just have Cooper Flagg be that face and move forward with him in mind. Right there, we've seen a lot of layers to the complications of just the chain of communication within the Dallas Mavericks organization. And it makes sense why Mark Cuban is consistently on an apology tour, making crazy statements. Oh, I regret selling the team to the Dumont family. Oh, I was never consulted about them trading Luka, etc., etc. The fans are basically seeing the trickle-down effects of the culture that the man created. So right now we have moved past the whole era of the NBA where superstar players do this whole let's link up fake buddy thing in order to try to chase championships. And in this segment right here, we're going to get yet a second confirmation of how the Giannis and Dame link up was always shaky from the start. I'll go ahead and put a link in the description below to my previous segment where another former NBA player, Jim Jackson, has stated that he was hearing rumblings of the same things between Giannis and Dame. Keep in mind, Damian Lillard came down with a major injury in his mid-30s, but yet the Milwaukee Bucks had cut him and completely left him hanging dry. I mean, we're talking about a guy that has to do a recovery with no team until the Portland Trailblazers came out of nowhere and rescued him. That's a very vulnerable position to be left, especially coming from a major star like Damian Lillard out there in Portland. But former NBA champion with the Dallas Mavericks, Brendan Hayward, gives great insight on some of the rumblings that he has always heard about the Dame and Giannis situation not even working out from the start. I'm always stating that Giannis has done a great job putting this fake nice guy persona on. Matter of fact, he has a second persona that he puts on that kind of throws people off or just disarms them. And that is the whole I'm confused, I'm new to this country, I don't know what's going on, and I'm going to ask questions that I already know the answers to. Even when he first stepped foot in that Miami Heat's locker room, asking the question, oh, is this where LeBron and all these guys did the dance? But behind the scenes, he has no problem getting his way and even cutting guys off. Look how he did Dame once again after the injury. But check out Brendan Hayward debunking the narrative that this was a friendly invite from Giannis for Dame to come into Milwaukee.
Giannis was in Milwaukee and invited Damian in to be the guy. I think from an offensive standpoint. What's that?
Did he?
Yes, he did. He did. I don't think Giannis, in his heart of hearts, I think he likes being the defensive backbone. I think he likes being the vocal leader. I don't think he wants to be the offensive guy running the show.
What if I told you a little birdie in Milwaukee told me that Giannis and Dame's coming together wasn't as copacetic as you might like to believe?
At what point? At what point?
From the very beginning.
And that right there should not come by any surprise. Dame was already making statements just a few months in, kind of hinting that he missed being back in Portland. Remember, at the time, Milwaukee was considered one of the top teams to compete for an NBA championship. So it's a major red flag that Dame is even giving out statements like that.
That makes no sense.
Because, well, I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
When you say, yeah, this
he drove that trade.
Let me finish.
Okay.
See, a lot of times when you're shifting the tone of who's the guy and who's not the guy,
yeah,
you got to understand, you got to shift your game a little bit. And that's where the pushback comes in.
Once again, in my previous segment, we seen Jim Jackson allude to the same thing. The whole Giannis and Dame combo never looked as fluid on the court. And that's because, unlike what Rick Buford had just mentioned earlier with Giannis not wanting to run the show, that is not true. We all seen when Dame finally showed up, that was not the case. Once again, Giannis puts on a couple personas to kind of unarm the NBA media as well as certain fan bases, but make no mistake about it, he does have a little bit of Mamba, that Kobe Bryant essence in him when it comes to running the show.
Because just think about the Giannis Dame pick and roll was supposed to become the most devastating pick and roll in the game. Why didn't it work? Because Giannis didn't want to switch up how he was used to playing. He likes to pick and pop and catch it and then go downhill. Well, you can say, man, I want you to be here, and it's your show. But when it's time to pick and roll, yo, my man, I need you to roll to help me out, and you're popping, your actions are saying, nah, I want you to be here, but I want to win my way. And that was the problem, because Giannis, in his mind, is thinking, my way has won a championship. Your way has never won anything. And so even though he invited Dame in, they never became what they were supposed to become, because Giannis was never all the way, if he's being truthful, he was never all the way, I'm going to do whatever it takes to help this guy. He didn't do it.
And I also believe Giannis kind of figured out that Dame wasn't the winning player that he thought he was. Once again, there's a reason why he stayed in Portland so long, even though a lot of the fan bases from other teams were saying, hey, Dame should be out there competing for a championship. Sometimes in the NBA, there's a player that comes along and he looks like he wants to compete for a championship, but the whole time he's really comfortable being the main guy, especially in Portland, around his family members, because Dame is from the Bay Area, right?
Why are you popping with Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis on the team? They're better shooters than you.
Yep.
When Dame comes off a pick and roll and you pop, you make life harder on him because the lane's more cluttered. Yep. No one's scared of you shooting. Like, these are the conversations that were being had. These were the things that were being told to Giannis, and he's like, nah, I'm used to winning this way, so this is what I want to do. So that's why I was like, yeah, he can say, I wanted Dame here. His actions, from what I saw and what was told to me, painted a totally different story.
I'm not disagreeing that ultimately when they got together and then that they had to work it out and how they were going to play, that's where things started to come apart. But initially from the jump, Giannis was holding his extension over the Milwaukee Bucks' head to make a move. And Damian Lillard was one of the guys that he wanted to play with because he thought Damian had something that, quite honestly, he didn't think he had, and he didn't think Jrue Holiday had.
Hey, right there, we forgot about good old Jrue. Another person that was kind of casted aside after, I would say, having a bad series in the previous season. But Jrue Holiday was a main contributing factor during Giannis's championship run. Let's not forget about that. But once again, there's a pattern here, because the way Dame was tossed aside, with just getting released by the Bucks in a very vulnerable part of his career, just being in his mid-30s, getting that major injury. And at the time, he had no team to do his recovery with. Thank God Portland looked out for him, because the NBA does have a setup where if a player does get injured and he's not on an NBA team, he would do his recovery with the league. It's very crazy, but Dame was at a very vulnerable position in his career. Let's not forget about that.
That to me was the great mistake that Giannis made, was undervaluing who Jrue Holiday was and how important he was to the way they played. And I think a big part of it simply was Giannis was enamored with Damian's ability to score, and ability to score without a whole lot of help in Portland. So I agree with you in terms of where it went, but initially that was a guy that he ultimately did want.
And Giannis slowly began to learn that even though he got Dame, he ended up having to put in more work because of the defensive liabilities of Lillard. This is interesting because in the NBA, thank God it's the end of the era where a guy like Kevin Durant says, oh, I'm going to go out and team up with my boy Kyrie and we don't even need a coach. Remember with Kyrie saying all that? And then there were many other stars trying to imitate what LeBron did in Miami, and even going as far as having too much say on the personnel, not realizing that when LeBron went to Miami, Pat Riley was the one that ran the show. That's a major difference. And a lot of these franchises were so scared of their stars leaving these teams that they sort of, bend the knee to some of their wishes.
All that said, Jaylen Brown, I totally understand why Jimmy Haslam, the new part owner of the Milwaukee Bucks, was hesitant about taking Jaylen Brown, because he was thinking Jaylen Brown's only got a couple of years left on his contract. We may be facing the same thing with Jaylen Brown that we did with Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think Jimmy Haslam, coming from outside of Milwaukee, is not enamored with who doesn't love Milwaukee. Like, he's like, I've been through it in Cleveland. We have a hard time keeping guys in Cleveland. Milwaukee's got the same issue.
Yeah, you definitely, players in the NBA have more
They have more say.
They have more say. But I've seen it, man. Like the players, like, listen, at the end of the day, players make really good money.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like peanuts compared to the money that the owners have.
1,000%.
So like they look at the players totally different. Like, yo, my man, I know you pulled up in the Bentley and that's cute, but I'm I'm worth $2.5 billion. Relax.
Yeah.
The NBA is a very interesting league because the hierarchy sometimes does get blurred, and superstar players at times do have a nice little leverage over the owners, especially Giannis at the time when Dame got traded there. The previous ownership group was scared about him not renewing his extension, while at the same time they were trying to sell the team. And I believe Giannis held it over their heads until they pulled that trigger and got Dame out of Portland. And again, Giannis is one of these stars that kind of came up in two different eras of the NBA. He is part of that player empowerment where guys like Anthony Davis forced their way out of LA. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant was running the show in Brooklyn. LeBron James, even though he is given sort of the face of this movement, when you really think about it, in Miami, Pat Riley is the one that ran the show. And that's where LeBron experienced the most success. There's been a lot of imitators since, and they have barely even gotten to the conference finals. But going back to Giannis, there is a culture that he is used to where he does share a bulk of the leverage over, I would say, the ownership group and just player personnel. Just peep his former teammate on the Bucks, Miles Turner, gives some insight into how much power Giannis really has over the organization.
So Doc Rivers, he didn't find anybody ever.
Mm-hmm.
So guys were late all the time. Guys were, showing up to film whenever they wanted to show up. Guys were missing meetings. Like, it was one of the craziest things I personally ever experienced. But any other team I've been on, guys got fined. And there was a sense of order and a sense of understanding. So yeah, you're late to the plane, fine. You're late to treatment, fine. You're late to film, fine. But I personally did not experience that last year for the first time in my career. So we'll see what Taylor Jenkins does, our new coach. We literally, if the plane took off at 2:00, we weren't leaving until 4:30. I'm being so serious, bro. It was crazy, dog. Guys were an hour late to the plane. It got to the point where I knew not to show up until like an hour after they said the plane was taking off. It was crazy. But anyways, that's easy. Giannis is going to show up whenever he wants, really. I think that it's kind of just came with the territory at that. And once I kind of saw what was going down, I was like, hey, man, shit, more power to you. They ain't going to find you. Shit, do what you do.
Right.
Except when we were going to Dallas. That's when I was like, all right, come on.
Now, Miles Turner was only his teammate for a year, so the loyalty is not necessarily there. And with some of that insight on the Giannis culture that happened in Milwaukee, a few of his teammates that are more loyal to him came to his rescue, but they kind of gave away the truth of what really goes on.
Can I be frank or no?
Yeah, absolutely. We want you to be frank.
A damn snitch. What? I played on the Bucks. I've never seen Giannis late one time. I played for the Clippers with Doc Rivers. I played for the Bucks with Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers was a player in the past. He's very lenient, right? He's very lenient when it comes to practicing.
So Pat Bev, if you say Giannis has never been late, why would you call Miles Turner a snitch?
I don't hear people complaining then when they got days off, right? So to get on a platform and you discuss your head coach and you discuss your main player, and mind you, you're coming from a team where people really expected a lot more from Miles Turner. If I'm being honest, people expected a lot more from what he provided with the Bucks. So for him to go on a platform and kind of discuss personal things with a team and kind of not really look at self. What could I have done to be better? How many more shots I could have blocked? What was my 3-point percentages? How did I go from it being in the Eastern Conference to beating this team to playing with Giannis and we're not even making the playoffs, right? I think it's an issue there.
You know, with Giannis, this is going to be very interesting to see if he brings this sort of culture in Miami, because you know how things are under Pat Riley with that Heat culture. There may be a clash right there. But check out Bobby Portis when he was even asked about Miles Turner's comments, and even he kind of dodged the truth.
He put everybody in a bad spot.
Definitely did. I didn't like that it was a lot of media. Like my mom and one of my best friends had sent it to me like around like 3:30 p.m. Central Time, bro. And at the time I looked at it and I said, I'm like, damn, like, all right, cool. Like, but then I kept going back and looking at it, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, damn, like that shit is kind of bad. But I ain't think that shit was gonna blow up like it blew up.
Boy, he said Giannis was coming an hour, 2 hours late. What you mean, BP?
But I ain't think it was gonna go like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, God damn, all these
That's
videos
Giannis.
going on, that crazy. Like that shit went crazy, bro.
Yeah.
Like, and then like it kind of put we ain't being leaders, like we ain't doing all this extra shit, but it ain't even like that for real. It just got kind of took out of context. Like you can ask, like, bro, literally we have the same 7 people at our airport that want us to sign things. Literally, we have the same 7 people. Like some teams might have 30 people or 40 people, but you know what I'm saying? We got these same dedicated 7 people that come want us to sign something every time we take off.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be
somebody need to call one of them people right now and ask them who late. They gonna say nobody was late.
You notice what Bobby P did right there? None of those fans would even know what time the plane was even supposed to leave. They just know it was there. He did a nice cha-cha slide and never clarified whether it was true or not. And Giannis going into Miami, the politics are going to be very interesting, not only with Heat culture, possibly clashing with Giannis culture, but also the politics of Bam Adebayo's contract. And that situation behind the scenes has been boiling up for quite some time. The NBA now, if you have a co-star that's getting paid a little bit too much, it actually hinders teams from putting surrounding pieces around the star players. We've seen how Giannis dealt with that in Milwaukee while having Dame getting paid well over $50 million a year, and things didn't quite go the way they expected. Now he's walking into Miami in a very similar situation. Shit, Tyler Herro's not even a star himself, and he felt the pressure because of the amount of money that Bam was getting paid, but not necessarily producing on the offensive end or just making things easier for everyone around him. And they got into a fight during Summer League.
MJ, this all stemmed from Tyler Herro's comments that leaked on social media critiquing Bam Adebayo. And Bam Adebayo on Friday morning at Resorts World Hotel at a practice court approached Tyler Herro about that. And they had a back and forth, and that culminated in Tyler Herro being struck in the face area. Both teams, the Heat and the Bucks, are aware of the situation. There is believed to be surveillance footage available to be reviewed as well, but at this point, no word on any investigation from the NBA. This is believed to be an off-court situation. Tyler Herro not pursuing any legal action as of right now, of course. And Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo clearly have had some sort of falling out. Potentially began last season as teammates together. It was their 7th year together as teammates in Miami, but now Tyler Herro has moved on in a trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's now in Milwaukee, and my understanding is both Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo here today on Monday want to move on from this situation, but obviously there was lingering effects from this throughout on Friday.
Again, Giannis is now walking into Miami where there's a lot of politics around Bam Adebayo's contract. As you can see, for those of you that are watching the visual version, he's going to be making well over $50 million a season. And when you add the addition of Giannis on the team with a pending extension that should be taking place in the very same offseason, it's going to complicate things in order to put enough decent pieces around these guys. That is the very same issue that took place in Milwaukee when Dame had arrived. But unlike the Milwaukee Bucks, the Miami Heat owner is not as deep-pocketed, and he is not going to hit or even touch that second apron. Right now, the NBA ecosystem is very interesting for stars because in a way now they're forced to kind of take pay cuts. Look at Jalen Brunson and Victor Wembanyama. That Giannis extension and how much he signs for is going to be very interesting. In today's league, when you sign the wrong guy to a mega extension and he can't quite live up or just have a crazy offensive impact on a team, it begins to make life harder for a lot of other players. And I do believe Tyler Herro was feeling that pressure, even though he was on what most teams would perceive a favorable contract. Just listen to how these two were really cool right before that Bam money started kicking in. For Bam Adebayo, I believe he was blindsided on some of the resentment that Tyler Herro had for him. And at some point, he is going to have to take a look at the behavioral patterns of Giannis. Remember, he got rid of Drew, Dame, and even with the Bucks just bending the knee to everything that he wanted, he still forced his way out. Just listen to how that resentment could really build up very quietly.
Who on the team will always have your back? No questions asked.
Who on the team will always have my back?
Like if a fight breaks out, who's coming to save you? Not save you, but be next to you. Who's one person though that's just
one person
come to the rescue?
Man, I'm gonna say T, just because we got the longest relationship.
Yeah, I'm coming.
Bam's an interesting player in today's league. Ever since he passed Kobe Bryant with that 80-plus point game, we've seen him get a lot of hate from NBA fans as well as many players. As a few of his teammates' DMs leaked out with a fan on Twitter, how he even went as far as providing graphs of Bam's lack of shooting in the mid-range. This shit gets crazy. But the fact that Herro went back and forth through Twitter DMs knowing that it's a possibility that the screenshots could leak. And it's bad. Let's check it out right here. Tyler Herro says a motherfucker's making $60 million, but they worried about me and what I do. And the fan says, Bam is a guy, please stop. And then Tyler Herro says, why are Heat fans so worried about me and what I do? But I'm not the best player on the team, right? And then the fan says, Bam does his job. He a top 5 defender and he gets 20 and 10. You the first nigga I need 25 and 10 out of. Damn, he sounds like he's gambling though. But Tyler Herro responded, you should get paid $60 million to be the top tier defender on some nights. I'm just wondering, since we talking. Damn. Herro's going in. Then the fan responded, I think it's because he performed on those playoff runs. Then Tyler Herro says, I didn't say any names. I'm just saying, should an elite defender be making $60 million a year? Answer that. If the shoe fits, it fits. Damn. Then the fan says, bro dropped 83. Tyler Herro then responds, says, okay, so why the fans so worried about Tyler and what Tyler does? I could post a pic right now and the fans are gonna go crazy. LOL. Then the fan responds, because Bam has shown if he's with a better player like Jimmy, we can go to the finals. Then Tyler Herro really responded right here. Buddy, if I'm healthy, they can't see me. Word to my mother. If I'm healthy, I'm the one who needs help. Who did Boston prioritize taking away when Jimmy got hurt? And we was the 8th seed. When I'm healthy, I need help, not the other guy. Word to my kids. Come on now, let's call a spade a spade. Damn, why would you say this in Twitter DMs? Come on. Oh, then Tyler continues, you lame as hell. You screenshotting now? Say no more, champ. And then the fan responded, hating on Bam is lame as hell. Niggas had to know the real hero. Yo, this is crazy. And then Tyler responded, it's okay, lame. You fanned out, like we said from the beginning. And then a little bit more back and forth. He's talking shit. Glad you're gone, Tyler, etc., etc. But that wasn't all of it. Tyler went even as far as to sending screenshots of just charts of guys who are bad shooters in the mid-range. And funny enough, not only Bam was on that list, but also Giannis. Once again, this shit's gonna get interesting in Miami. But check out right here, Shannon Sharp touched base on it. That nigga Shannon love to get messy, I tell you that, boy.
Here, Herro posted a graphic showing Giannis and Bam have the lowest field goal on mid-range field goal attempt. Look at this.
Damn, Herro posted that?
In the DM.
Damn. Hey, the hate be real, don't it, man?
Yo, my man Joe Johnson is shocked. Former superstar of the Atlanta Hawks. He was like, if a motherfucker was talking shit about me, I'll knock his ass out. Joe Johnson is a big old country boy. I know he would be sick if his teammate was shitting on him like that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's gonna be real. If he go in that locker room, you know, they look, I don't want to put it out there, but y'all know what's going on. Y'all know what's going on.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Y'all do your own research. I ain't helping y'all.
Yeah.
Herro posted a graphic on his IG story. Damn. I mean, Bam.
Damn, I thought that shit was in a DM. He posted that in an IG story? Oh, yeah, he ain't fucking with Bam like that. Once again, in today's NBA, if you give out a large contract to a player that can't necessarily get buckets on his own or just make it easier for his teammates, there's a level of resentment that's going to build up because that pressure gets then spread out to the rest of the players. And you don't know how they're going to react, especially when they see guys cashing in $55 million checks a season.
Damn, ain't trade you?
Damn.
You need to get mad at Riles. And plus, Riles upset that you every year at some point in time, you going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
You know how Riley feel about that. Joe, you played for him. He hate that.
Hey, emotions high. Okay, Ocho. Emotions are high.
I can't get mad at the damn player.
Right. Nah, you can't.
What Bam? What Bam do?
I thought that was his dog. I thought that was his man's.
I thought so too.
I tell you what, Bam better watch his back because Giannis ain't no better. If that contract that he has is getting in the way of Giannis competing for a championship, it's definitely going to be an issue. Crazy enough, they interviewed Tyler Herro after the altercation. You know, ESPN got to try to get their clicks. And this is what he had to say.
It's all love. It's all love in Miami. You know, I've seen a couple of the guys and coaching staff, Chris Quinn, Spo, you know, the front office guys. We're all good in Miami, and it's just the opportunity for both sides to reset, get a fresh start, and we're both, you know, super happy for this.
Damn, Tyler got dapped up, man. His eye is kind of purple. I ain't gonna lie. But the recklessness on his part by just doing that on IG stories and through a Twitter DM, it shows you that he didn't give a fuck. So yeah, he should have been ready to squabble. But it is what it is. Pat Riley's definitely going to have to tool up and put some nice pieces around Giannis and Bam, especially with that chart Tyler Herro showed on his IG story. Bam and Giannis is some of the worst mid-range shooters right now. Damn, that boy don't want to see Bam live a little bit. That Miami Heat culture is definitely going to have an interesting clash with Giannis culture. You guys definitely hit up the links in the description below. Check out my NBA True Story playlist for more segments like this. And until next time, you fellas stay safe. Peace.